guys, this is Christina Coleman here with Global Grind, and today we are talking to rapper and activist Tef Poe about his Ferguson experience and what's next for Ferguson. So it's really interesting that you're here because we're a music site, we're also a social activist site,
right?
And I mean, you're right on the lines of what we do here, so we're really excited to have you. But it's interesting because I know I've did some research and I know that you weren't a very social kid, but you're like one of the ones on the front lines for Ferguson.
Yeah.
How'd that happen?
Hip hop brought that out of me a long time ago. I remember being in high school. I didn't talk much. I was very off to myself. And then I've always been rapping since I was like 12 years old, writing rhymes, poetry, and eventually I crossed over to hip hop. And I remember watching other people rap at school in ciphers and stuff. And I knew I could out-rap them, but my personality just wasn't there yet as far as like showcasing it. So, you know, the music brought that out of me eventually. And, you know, I'm to the point now where like back at home, people know like if something of this magnitude goes down, then I'm kind of expected to say something or do something. I think in relationship to Ferguson and the type of music that I make, I would have personally considered myself a sellout if I didn't contribute something greater to the situation. And, you know, like a lot of rappers rap about conscious stuff. I don't really consider myself a conscious rapper. I'm a black man living in America, so I rap about things that black people live through. So a lot of rappers would consider themselves conscious rappers, however, coming from home, but you know, they're the same people I didn't see on the front lines when, you know, the armored trucks and the tear gas. Exactly. So people rap about revolution from like a fantasy standpoint, like what they'll do if it actually happens. And I'm not really into that. You know, I rap about the everyday problems. You know, how we gonna get rid of this alderman? How we gonna get rid of this mayor? So, you know, Ferguson was right along those lines.
So Ferguson, this isn't new for you. You've been rapping about the lives
right.
you live
right.
since you've been rapping,
mm-hmm.
right?
Right.
And so there's this thing, like the responsibility of the artist.
Mm-hmm.
You talked about how these conscious rappers were on the front line.
Right.
You have people like Young Thug on the BET
mm-hmm.
Hip Hop Awards red carpet talking about don't have responsibility to talk about social issues,
mm-hmm.
but you do.
Right.
Why?
I mean, hip hop sets the tone for the hood. So if you know, you see it in simple measures, like when Cameron started wearing all pink, right? Every hood in America, that was okay, that was acceptable. So I feel like we as rappers, you know, some people, they're not gonna watch CNN, they're not gonna go to church, they're not gonna listen to Barack Obama. Like in certain pockets of St. Louis, I have more power than Barack Obama. So like, I have a responsibility. And the same thing goes for Young Thug. He may not see it at this point in time, but I believe like, you know, maybe he'll grow and encounter an experience that makes him say, you know what, I do have a responsibility to this. So, you know, I think that even in music like Young Thug's music, there's an element of consciousness there that you may not see it, you may not hear it, but there's an element of it there buried beneath what he's normally doing.
Do you think there's a sense of apathy, or do you think it's the record companies, or do you think that, you know, rappers out there today just, or some of them just aren't at a point where they're ready to talk about?
I was signed to a label once, and when I got my deal, I told them, you know, I don't want to come out as the political rapper. And they were like, why? And I said, you know, I don't want to be stuck in that lane. And they said, do what you got to do to get the people and worry about it later. So that lets me know that the reality of the situation is the record label really doesn't care what you do as long as it equates to sales of some sort. You know, they're all about the dollar. So you can rap about lint on your shirt as long as that equates to some type of dollar sign, some type of, you know, massive amounts of people buying into the brand. They don't really care. So I think a lot of it is the artists being afraid to make that leap, you know, because you have people like Kanye. He's like one of the biggest artists of our generation, not just hip hop, but I mean, every album there's something conscious in there. You have somebody like Tupac, arguably the biggest rapper of all time, and obviously there's a conscious element to the music. So, I mean, that just shows you that, you know, we can come up with excuses all day, but people buy into what's real.
And let's just dial back a bit to Ferguson. I was in Ferguson the second week, the week after Mike Brown was shot. And I know you've been on the ground since August 9th. Where were you when Michael Brown was shot? And how did you feel when you found out?
I was at home. I do a monthly hip hop party called Rap City. with DJ Needles and Tech Supreme at the Blank Space. My mind was really focused on promoting that. I logged on to Instagram to post a flyer. And when I logged on, I was sitting in the room with my manager, and I saw a Facebook stat that said an unarmed kid had just been shot in Ferguson. And in St. Louis, unfortunately, that's not that rare of an incident. When I got on Instagram to post a flyer, I came across a picture of his stepfather. I thought that it was actually his real father because he held a sign that said, "My son has just been murdered by Ferguson police." And the way that man looked completely moved me because he was on West Florissant, which is a street that I've traveled up and down countless times. At the time, I was working for a education reform campaign. And we had, for some reason, unknown to me, we decided to start working in Ferguson. Prior to that, we were in like Jennings and the city and other areas. But for about a month, we had been in Ferguson. And I had noticed when we started canvassing out there how aggressive the police was. Like, we couldn't really walk the streets, we had to stay on the side. And Ferguson doesn't have many sidewalks, so you can get ran over. So we would have constant conversations about, you know, making sure you stayed out the street because the police were kind of like wild cowboys. So when I saw the picture of his stepfather, which I thought was his real father, the look in that man's face was just completely distraught. So I paused and I reshared the picture, and I had a pretty healthy social media following. So I said, man, I'm gonna do what I can to circulate this on Twitter and Instagram. So I started circulating it. A friend of mine works for Al Jazeera. So she took whatever I was tweeting and retweeted it. And she has like a worldwide following, so people started retweeting and posting things from there. And to me, she was one of the first outside media connects that helped us spread the story. I stood up in the living room. I was kind of just pacing. I didn't know what to do or how we were gonna do it. And then I put a Facebook stat up that said, "Everybody just go to Ferguson." And then people hit me up like, "So where you want us to meet you at?" After that, we got in the car, we went, we drove down West Florissant, and we couldn't even get into the county. Like, there were cop cars from every jurisdiction there, and they were blocking it off. The first thing I noticed, it looked like a scene from like an action movie, like Bruce Willis movie or something. And it was a little bit more shocking and alarming because I was in it, I was living it. Right. So we drove past the cop cars, we went to the Quick Trip because for some reason everybody was talking about Quick Trip. So I went to the Quick Trip, which I've been to countless times as a teenager, and I got out the car and I just felt the vibe, and I was like, man, ain't nothing going on right here at this Quick Trip. We need to go to the street where he got shot at. So we went to Canfield Gardens, we walked down there. I see so many people outside. And when I got there, I crossed the street to go have a conversation with someone, and on my way back across the street, I saw a puddle of blood in the sidewalk, in the side of the street. And I stepped over the puddle of blood and I looked down at my foot and I was like, man, this is crazy. Like, his blood is right here in the street. So from there, I just stayed out there all day, just kind of observing. And then I noticed at nighttime, they flooded the apartment complex area with as many cops as they could. They had so many sirens that it changed. It felt like daytime when it was nighttime. And then they got out the car with German Shepherds and double-barrel shotguns, and a local drug dealer pulled in behind the cops, blocked off the street, got out and sat on his hood with his arms crossed, and he was like, y'all gotta leave. So then everybody in the community turned up like, yeah, you gotta go. And they got in their cars, they drove off and left, and at that very moment, I said, you know what? The police don't take defeat lightly, so they'll be back, and when they come back, it's gonna be ugly, and that's exactly what happened.
So some people would describe Ferguson as a war zone. Some people aren't comfortable with using the term war because they don't want to disrespect the troops. Mm-hmm. But you were there. You were tear gas. They shot rubber bullets at you. You saw the militarized police force. Was it a war zone?
The only reason it's not a war zone is because the civilians didn't have weaponry available to us to fight back. In a war zone, both parties have weapons that are capable of fighting back. We didn't have weapons, you know. All we had was hands and intellect. And, you know, that's the part that kind of upsets me a little bit. I was protesting outside the police department last week sometime, and they met us with a lot of aggression. And I said to the police officer, I said, you know, all we have is our voice and our hands. Y'all have all the guns in the world. Y'all have armored vehicles, y'all have tanks, y'all have tear gas, smoke bombs, you have helicopters. You can even call in the National Guard to assist you if you have to. All we have is, you know, just our physical bodies and our intellect and our will to push back on you. And, you know, it's crazy that the protesters are painted with such negative energy when, you know, you look at the photos, you don't see us aiming M16s at the police. You don't see us standing on top of the roof of a building with an AK-47. Yet the other night, when we're out there protesting, they send people with sniper rifles on top of the roof of the fire department to aim at us, potentially if we get out of control.
So I read the other day that voter registration in Ferguson has soared, which is bittersweet because, of course, we didn't need Michael Brown's death for this to happen, but it's also a great show. It's just a great show when we unite what can actually happen.
Mm-hmm.
But do you think, like, if we do, you know, vote, you know, faces of color into Ferguson government, or if there are more than 3 black Ferguson police officers patrolling the streets, will it really make a difference?
Claire McCaskill tried to hit me with that when I did PBS after Ferguson, and I couldn't believe that came out of her mouth, to be honest with you. She told me that I should run for city council. But the difference is, when I have a problem with the system, they tell me to run for office. When her son has a problem with the system, she goes to work and fixes it. You know, he doesn't have to consider being a politician just because he's politicized. And that's the problem. You know, I come from Pine Lawn, which is, I have my own day in Pine Lawn, August 6th, they gave me a day. But the truth about it is, it's an all-black township in St. Louis. Black mayor, black police officer, black everything. But the problem is, they're still corrupt because the system gives leadway for you to be corrupt. I think what we're seeing in Ferguson is, you know, regular everyday people, cats that are Crips, cats that are Bloods, drug dealers, young women that, you know, just feel a way about what's going on. And they don't know what to do, but they want to do something. And I think the power of this situation lies within the hands of the people.
And let's be real, race is a huge equation, a huge part of this equation. And so you have white protesters, you have black protesters.
Right.
Just recently, people came together and they staged a beautiful and powerful protest for Mike Brown at the St. Louis Symphony. But
Right.
is there a difference between white protesters and black protesters? Like, do white people actually get it?
I mean, protesting is more dangerous for black people, but living in America is more dangerous for us as well. But at the same time, we have allies of different creeds, different colors, different sorts. You know, people talk a lot about, like, well, how can you partner with those white people? Well, there's a gay white man on the front line that'll take a rubber bullet for me quicker than my own brother will. And that's real. Like, these are people that I see there every day who feel a way. They don't necessarily get it completely, but they know that something is wrong and they want to help out.
There's a weekend coming up in October, October 10th through 13th, if I'm correct.
Right.
What are we going to Ferguson for? I know there's going to be an exodus of people going to Ferguson.
I look at, you know, we're going to Ferguson this weekend to create one of the first American global actions against police brutality. When you really think about it, there hasn't been like a global front in America against police brutality towards minorities. And I think that's what the Weekend of Resistance represents. It represents a message and a shot that will be heard around the world.
What if slavery's a dream that a dope fiend had? Krills underneath his teeth and he suddenly relapsed. Saw the ships at the bay of the African shore. Woke up and the nightmare existed no more. What if George Bush is the second coming of Christ? Destruction is the matrimony in sight. What if life is the afterlife and we already dead? The footage of the moment replayed in your head, looping over until you die for the second time. What if money influence your intelligence and mind? And those with the lesser are really the oppressors? What if niggas is colorblind and whitey is the nigga? And poison in their skin pigment make them act different. And black people made them sell crack for a living. What if Mike Brown didn't die when Darren Wilson killed him? And CNN didn't come to Ferguson to film it? What if?